Ooh, it is a crisp fall day here in New York City. Sun's just starting to peek out. It's going to be a great day. Who am I, Mr. Rogers? Welcome back to the I Am Your Friend podcast. I'm your host, Aiden Licker. Thank you so much for tuning in. This episode, I sat down with my friend Brendan Orr, who I've been friends with for a long time. We played t-ball together. We were kids, reconnected in college, and became super close friends. And he just happened to be here this weekend. And I was like, you know what, buddy? Let's get on the pod, eh? His band Canetis just put out their new EP on All That Is Real. 4 banger tracks if you're into like the indie rock type of stuff. If you're in the Buffalo area, they're playing all around Buffalo all the time, as well as his Strokes cover band, Slow Animals. And he's just bit of a Buffalo legend, I feel like. The guy just reps Buffalo on his back, and his grind never stops to keep performing music around the city, and just a really good human being and a good friend of mine. We discuss a lot of things about growing up in South Buffalo and what that was like, and how our views on a lot of things changed over the years as we kind of surrounded ourselves with different types of people, and we discuss a lot about songwriting, the music we grew up with. If you make it to the end of the episode, we just kind of start nerding out about the Strokes and Blink-182. So if that's something that interests you, stick around. Anyway, the video for this one got messed up because my computer does this dumb thing when you're trying to record video and audio into it at the same time, where you have to sometimes click the record button on the video multiple times, and sometimes you don't. And I forgot to check it this time, so it just didn't record. So if you're watching on YouTube or the video version on Spotify, you're just going to look at 2 stills of our faces. And that's fun too, you know? But I have a feeling most of you are just listening to the audio, so who cares? Here's the episode.
Friendship, for example, is a real gift.
It's an insane world. In it there is one sanity, the loyalty of old friends.
You're the best friends anybody ever had.
Alone, bad, friend, good.
Bubba was my best good friend. I had to make sure that he was okay.
Friendship, family, these are the things that matter.
We just become best friends. Yep.
Touch my friends again and I'll bind you. Thanks, Mike. You're my best friend here.
Lose one friend, lose all friends, lose yourself.
We ride together, we die together. Bad boys for life.
That's what friends are for, right?
Friends? Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
If you're not over here in 15 minutes, you can find a new best friend. You've been saying that since the 5th grade.
Brendan, you are the lead vocalist of a band that's rising in success in the local Buffalo music scene, Canetis. Just put out a new EP. Can you remind me of what it's called? Because I'm a bad interviewer.
It's okay. It's called On All That's Real.
On All That's Real. I listened to it 3 times now. I listened to it yesterday.
No way.
4 songs, right?
4 songs, yep.
Very good. I really like all of them. The opening track is probably my favorite off of it. If I
had a feeling that would have been your favorite.
It's so good, dude. You guys really like watching. I mean, I've known you as a musician and songwriter for so long that watching your like progression, especially like finding like Canetis was like when you guys first started that band and I was first hearing the music you guys were putting out, I was like, oh, he found his thing.
Yeah.
You know, which was really cool to see as like your friend and as a fellow musician and stuff. So
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it definitely felt like that was the case. I think, you know, as you know, with doing music, as long as both of us have a huge component, if not the component, is the other bandmates that make up the band. You know, it's who you are going on this like quest of making music with. And, you know, it really helped that going into it. I mean, John Greenan, our dearly beloved pal, drummer, you know, him and I had been wanting to get back into a band together for a while at that point. We had some time that we were in Kill the Clock together, and then we had done a really brief side project called For the Record with our other pal, John Vaughn.
Forgot about For the Record.
Yeah, it was a minute.
The amount of Fredonia projects that were created were, especially during like the Battle of the New Bands thing that they would do, is like, because John Greenan and I also had Whiskey Business.
risky business, man.
I often also forget about, but it was a fun scent. Sorry,
you
I
guys,
didn't mean to cut you off.
No. You guys, I remember used to rip Jackie and Wilson, right, by Hosier.
One of the best.
Never forget
One
it.
of the best. I love that song.
But yeah, so we had John. Around that time, I had also started to hang out with Matt Sasha, who is just an unbelievable guitar player. Matt is one of the best guitar players I think that I've ever been in a band with. Obviously, in terms of his abilities and everything, but I don't think I've met a guitarist that I've worked with or collaborated with before that you just hear the emotion in the playing to the degree with him. It's cool. He's not the kind of guy that's gonna just run crazy runs and stuff like that, but he's just very it's kind of similar, and I feel a way to how John Frusciante is, where John Frusciante has all the ability in the world. That dude can play any kind of music. He could play as fast, as slow as you want him to, but he's so intentional with the notes that he chooses to play, and you feel the emotion in his playing, and it really supports the vocals and the rest of the song in a way that is really unique. And so with Matt, him and I had played a show together when I was in the Riffs, and he was in a band called the Brownstones. And
wow, that's a fire band name.
Yeah, honestly. Right. Yeah, and then I think there was another. They were called the Nothing Casual, I think, or something, or something casual, something like that. But I just remember the first time seeing Matt play. I just was immediately I need to go talk to this dude after, and I need to figure out a way to play music with him, because I just was so smitten with his playing.
Yeah.
Then we have Matt Brockeneer, who is, I feel the kind of quiet calm in the band, and he's just this very steady, rock solid presence that he's kind of I don't know. I think Matt just kind of keeps us all together with his composure and everything in a way, and he's just so smart musically that.
You could tell that he's very professionally trained.
Oh yeah, big time.
I mean?
And then of course you have Mike Butler, our other guitar player,
Master shredder.
Yeah, dude. And you will not. He's as technically sound of a guitar player as you will find. He's very creative and ambitious when it comes to his the writing of his guitar parts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And is somebody that, because he's so good, he knows that he has to continuously challenge himself. And so I think that to a degree, we all come from very different musical backgrounds and musical interests and everything like that. And I think what's so cool about the band, kind of bringing it back to your original point in question, is the fact that we, I think, have this very cool, solid foundation of being friends. And because of that kind of allows us to have the comfort with each other to really push each other and to make each other better in a way that I've really never experienced in a band before.
I think that's what a lot of people might not understand is for the most important piece, I think, is really just the connection between people.
It's huge.
In any sort of creative process. Really fight. That's how I felt writing songs with Charlie in post-prom. It was just it felt like two puzzle pieces of songwriters. You know what I mean? That's just we just figured out a way to just write. We write the same style and have the same passion for it, but what he is able to do makes up for what I might not necessarily.
Right. It's complementing each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think what's cool about it too is, and I'm sure that you experienced this with Charlie as well, but it's something that I think is really important that I don't think that I realized until getting older and continuing to be in bands and having these different experiences, is the importance of being vulnerable in your music. You have to be
1,000%.
able to really be your most authentic and vulnerable self. And I think in coming up through the Buffalo music scene and in Fredonia and stuff like that, there's a lot of emphasis that's placed on I need to get ahead, I need to be better than this band, I need to be better than that band.
Yeah, there's a competitive nature to it for sure.
When in reality it's if you're vulnerable in your for me, my lyric writing, and then also with just songwriting, and allowing yourself to kind of be having your wounds open, I guess, in a way, and being with people that also understand that and feel comfortable doing that on their end and stuff like that. That's really, I think, how you kind of get to the point of being oh my God, I'm in a band that this feels like this is how this is supposed to go, when things go well, when things go poorly, just having that kind of remain constant allows you, I think, to kind of get through those highs and lows. Because that's got to be at the root of it, if you can't go into it with a mindset of like, I need to make something that's like this good. It's like, no, I need to make something that like
it's just
I
real
feel
and
good
honest
about, that's real.
to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like a huge kind of, bringing it all the way back, that's I think a huge part of the making of this EP, you know, like on All That's Real. It's like it's with all of our EPs, we take a line from one of the songs and have made that the EP name. And so like with this one, I think that was like a really big part of it. And John was the one that really kind of like latched onto that, like from the get. When we had put out like a bunch of ideas for names for the EP, John was like, I think like this is the one. Like it kind of is the culmination of not only the record but like our journey as a band, and just like, you know, being able to have it be a kind of walkthrough of like relationships with people, relationships with yourself, and you know, just being able to understand the like very deep intricacies of just like going through everyday life and like the human experience.
Totally.
Which I know sounds like very like
no,
meta,
but it's like,
or not, I don't know. I mean, not just like preachy or anything like that, but that's kind of gets back to like the vulnerability
again.
point.
Yeah. There's definitely like this. There's a weird part about being like a quote unquote artist. Like even calling yourself an artist feels weird.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Totally.
But it is like, I mean, that's the mindset you put yourself in, and that's like, you know, when you want to, as you have this creative, like yearning in you that to just like do something. So like, I think, you know, it's hard when you want to like talk about the work, and I think we just have this like idea in our culture that's just like, if you are like going like trying to be as like, I don't know, deep, I guess, into what you're creating, it can come off as like full of yourself or whatever.
Right. Totally.
And nobody wants to come off like that, but
it's a weird line that you kind of have to try and like learn how to toe.
And I think the authenticity is what is that line.
For sure.
Because I think the idea of like being full of yourself, and this is something like I struggle with internally, you know what I mean? I'm just like, I've been thinking about this a lot, of like the idea of like, it takes a big ego to like do these things, like to want to be the lead singer of a band. You know what I mean? Like it takes having a big ego, which I feel like a lot of people have the idea of like having a big ego is like a bad thing. But I don't think it necessarily is. And I think it's how you navigate it. And funny that you mentioned like us covering that Hosier song, because I feel like he's like the perfect example of how to navigate that. Cause
For
like
sure.
a guy who obviously had like, you don't get to that level and achieve what he has achieved without having that large of an ego to like guide you to that, to like set your goal to be that big, to achieve like big dreams, you know?
Well, and I think in the way that you're describing like ego, you know, the bad side of it is approaching it with like this, like I'm the fucking shit, like mentality. When reality, it's like no, right. But I think that what it comes down to, like the good side of like the ego is like being able to like have it to the point that you can be like, not like, oh, I'm the fucking man, but like, no, like I can fucking do this thing. Like I believe in myself and like I can do this. And like, even if I don't fully believe myself, I'm going to like make myself do this to like put myself out there.
That's what one of my favorite quotes from like one of my favorite people ever is from Jim Carrey, when he was like in like the height of his career, like probably like 97, I think. And he had just put out like every big movie, like in a 3-year span, he put out like all of his hits. And I remember there's some sort of interview where somebody's asking him, they're like, how do you like, you know, stay working this hard? And like, how do you like think you've achieved all of this? And he was like, I have this insane belief that I'm just able to manifest anything that I want for myself.
That's
you know
crazy.
What I mean? And it's like, and that's really what we're talking about, I think, comes down to, is that like self-belief of like, I mean, I feel like it was the same thing with like me moving here. You know what I mean? I talked about it a little bit on the episode last week about, I think like there is, you know, I have that like anxious part of my brain that thinks about all the reasons not to go for something.
For
like
sure.
That like the risk of everything is scary.
Yeah.
And I think about, I'm like, thank God I did not listen to that voice and instead listen to like the insane ego one that was like, no, dude, you can do this.
Right.
You know?
Right. I think that kind of lends to the conversation we were having last night a little bit. That like,
remind me, we did
have a lot of conversations last night. No, just I think that for people, you know, and I'm looking at this from the lens of like people from Buffalo who moved to like the city or move anywhere, you know, I think that there's this really not so great mindset that people have, where it's like, you know, like you're saying with like the reservations, where it's like, well, what if I go and like it doesn't work out or whatever? And it's like, dude, the fact of you taking the plunge in the first place and trying it is something that like 1% of the population can say that they're doing. And look at you. I mean, you've been here since January and have like found your place here and are still finding your place. I mean, Christ, it hasn't even been a full year yet. But, you know, I even have friends who have been here for several years, and they even still are kind of like, well, if I like move somewhere else or move back home, like, I don't know, like, am I like giving up or whatever? And it's like, I feel like not the approach that you should take. It's like with each step in life, you have like, you know, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? And at a certain point for all of you guys who have moved here, it's like, no, like you chose to take the plunge, and that in and of itself is a massive accomplishment. It's something that's like so huge, because it's not easy upending your life and having to like move to a new city, especially one as big as New York and as overwhelming as here. Yeah. And so even, dude, I mean, being able to keep your head above water, it's been amazing to see, you know, and obviously with you and I going back as far as we have, I just am beyond proud of you, man, for fucking making it happen.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
But I mean, to bring it back to the original point of, it is like I contribute that to like the ego of like being like having like the self-belief to be like, oh, I'm going to go try to, you know, if I'm going to try to be successful, like looking at long-term future, I'm like, what is the success or what is like the ceiling of, you know, doing this in Buffalo, and is that what I want to achieve? And I don't know, you know, the old go big or go home mentality really kind of stuck with me. And I was just like, no, I mean, we might as well go. Because if it's like, if I am able to do it here, you know, then that proves, I mean, that trumps everything else. Yeah. You know what I mean? And
God, yeah. Yeah. Being able to make a career for yourself here in of all places. I mean, obviously there's so many, you know, businesses and opportunities and everything like that, but there's also a shitload of people. Yeah. And there's a lot of other people that are trying and vying for the same things that you are. And so being able to make that kind of inroad for yourself is huge. And I think that kind of taking it a step further, I think that in a way like validates the thought in your head of being like, no, I can fucking do this thing, you know, like, and that's got to be very satisfying. I'm sure, you know? Like in the midst of all of the chaos of being here, do you find that you take the time to really like stop and be like, I'm doing this thing? Yeah.
I think that's something that like I have like the trait of like, you know, I don't know about trait, but the practice of gratitude is something I've had to look towards in like, you know, anytime I've been going through like any sort of like depressive episodes, you know what I mean? People talk about basically like the idea of practicing gratitude is like, you know, a sure way out of feeling upset about your situation, you know what I mean? Because it kind of changes your perspective to be like, oh yeah, look at all the things that, you know, I'm grateful for, you know, all the good things in my life, you know, rather than focusing on your shortcomings or whatever. So I kind of already had the gratitude bone, you know, so when I got here, it kind of was a little bit overwhelmed. I also like very much like it's very easy, and I think it's very common for people who move to the city that like in their first few years are just like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed about everything, you know, because it's like, oh my God, I did make it here and I am surviving, and the city is amazing, and you know that energy of the city is real, and getting caught up in it is super fun, and yeah, I don't know, I have a lot less dark days here than I did back home in Buffalo, and that's not like you know, that's not me knocking Buffalo at all. It was just like validating that like it just kind of wasn't gonna be for me forever, for sure. Know what I mean? And I still love it. But I think what's funny is shifting gears here a little bit, and something that we were kind of talking about last night is like the place that you and I both come from, being, you know, we both grew up in South Buffalo, and I eventually moved to West Seneca, which for anybody listening that doesn't know the area, it's just like the suburb, the first suburb out of the city. And so, but you and I are very similar in the fact that we're both like artistic, creative guys, and obviously
That's not the vibe there.
No, it is not. It's very jock oriented, and very much like overly masculine,
for sure,
straight white vibes that are not great. And I don't know. I always felt like a bit of an outsider there, and I feel like you're a guy who definitely. I don't know. I might be wrong, but I feel like you're a guy who was able to figure out how to blend in maybe better than I have. But I don't know. Maybe I also have as well. Maybe that's just in my own head. But I'm curious as to like, I'm sure we have a lot of similar views on like growing up in that area and feeling not very belonging to it and feeling like, I don't know, that there was like something wrong with us because we didn't fit this mold that existed there.
It is such a fascinating thing to think about, because I think a lot of the opinions that I have on South Buffalo and growing up there, I've kind of formulated in retrospect and kind of looking back. At the time, I think growing up, because I was really into sports, and like I didn't really start to find my thing with music and make that transition until I got to high school, which was a whole other thing in and of itself, because I went to an all boys Catholic school, and it is just like testosterone overload. But I think that when it comes to growing up there, it just, you know me, I always try to like be kind to people and like approach any interaction that I have with somebody in like a positive way, like be nice to somebody until they give you a reason not to, pretty much.
Sure.
And, it felt like a lot of times growing up, and especially as I got older, that like something just like wasn't fully clicking there. And so when it came time that I got to like my senior year of high school, I had friends and people that I hung out with, but it didn't really feel like they were, aside from a couple of them that I'm still, remain close with, it didn't feel like, wow, these are the people that I'm going to like be hanging out with the rest of my life. When I think in hindsight, that's a very good thing, because a hallmark of South Buffalo is it's very much one of those, a lot of the people that come from there, you're born there, you grow up there, you live there, you die there.
Yeah.
And so I think in a way it was kind of, and like I said, like in hindsight and looking back, it was kind of reassuring to me that like it never really felt like I just felt like I was in a consistent state of like trying to fit in and whatever and finding my place within that. But then by the time senior year came around, I was kind of just like chomping at the bit to go to college. And another funny thing that we were talking about last night is the fact that it took going 45 minutes south to Chautauqua County, Fredonia, New York, for me to, I think, figure out a lot about life and a lot about myself too. And I think it was through those experiences and meeting people who aren't in that bubble, because that's really what it is. Like, you think you have this perception of what the world is because it's like that's all like Buffalo, South Buffalo was like really it. Like I didn't know people from even like that many other parts of like the city for that matter. You knew people from West Seneca a lot because it neighbors it and just like mutual friends and stuff like that. But it took going to Fredonia to kind of have that perspective of being like, that was kind of fucked up growing up there, like there is like a very, I think like, I don't want to sound like too much of a dick, but like a very like insincere headspace, I think that a lot of people have there. There are some absolutely wonderful, beautiful people that I know and love very dearly who are from South Buffalo, still live in South Buffalo. Our pal Emily Prendergast, perfect example, just like a good human, but she's very similar to you and I think. I think that's the thing, is that like a lot of people are able to like still have some kind of, I guess, respect for our roots and growing up there, but also having at the same time a mindset of like, I'm never living there again for the rest of my life.
Yeah, there was a point for sure when like I realized that, like, and it probably was around college. And what we were joking about last night is, the idea of like being in New York City, you know what I mean, which is like unbelievably diverse and people from all different parts of the world with different interests, and everybody is very unique to different cultures and whatever. So, but for us, like coming from a place where like everybody was pretty much the same, and then going again to this like small town where it was just like dipping our feet into the water of people from just different parts of the state was enough for us to go, oh my God, you know, which is
kind of
like,
messed up.
Right. Which just kind of speaks volumes about growing up there, I think.
I mean, it's kind of like, I was just going to say, it's kind of like the classic thing where, I don't know if you experience this in West Seneca really, but like if I ever on the off chance, very, very off chance, I'm like going out in South Buffalo, or I run into people from South Buffalo who I went to high school with, and you know, they come up to me and like slap me up, and like it's just this like surface level friendliness or whatever, and I'm like, one, this is just bullshit, we both know it. Two, you were a fucking dick to me in high school. Like,
right.
what are you trying to be buddy? Stop asking me about like music.
Yeah.
Like, you don't give a shit. I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
like, let's just kind of sift through that, you know?
Typical, you still doing music?
Yeah. Dude. Oh.
Nice, dude. Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good to keep up with it. Yeah. What do you? Yeah, I am. What are you
getting
up to,
drunk
man?
at Doc Sullivan's every fucking
I just
Friday
hang out
and
at
Saturday?
Doc's. Nice, dude. That's cool. I wish I knew when we were kids and you were a dick to me that you would have peaked at this point.
Literally, I mean, and it's so funny because you can look back, I feel like, and all of the people that, like, it just was so clear, but you don't realize it at the time. But in hindsight, it's like, it's so obvious that, like, person X, Y, and Z peaked in high school. Like, they were that, you know.
Yeah.
And not to even talk shit, you know, because
I know,
it's
I
whatever.
really don't want to, like,
are,
shit on people because everybody, you know what I mean? Like, it's really not their fault. That's just, like, you know.
And if it makes you happy, it makes you happy. Like, if you you love where you're from so much and, like, you don't feel the need to try and, like, you know, get out there to like different places or do different things or hang out with different people, then like, hey, more power to you.
Right.
You know, it's just, I think that, you know, it's not a secret though that those people lack perspective. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, I think, while we're sitting here saying this stuff and being like, I'm not trying to be a dick, but like I think it comes from, it's not being a dick because it comes from like an informed opinion,
right?
You know, it's not like I'm just talking out of my ass. This is like the real world experience, you know, and it's the same for you too. It's like when you're in that, like, and having the ability to look back on it or being older and putting yourself in it, and like, you know, you kind of are able to take a beat and be like, damn, like this is not really how I want to like live. You know.
It's funny, and I don't know if you experienced this, but like you know, this was a realization I had in college of being like how long I tried to like force myself into a mold I just didn't fit into, you know. And I always preface that by saying like I don't think I was like made to feel left out necessarily. Like I had friends, I got like invited to parties. I think I was regarded as like a semi-popular kid maybe. You know, so it wasn't like I was just like alone or anything, but it just like, I felt like I was always trying to like, I like didn't like who I was because it didn't feel like it belonged there. So I had to like always kind of change and kind of like, even like in terms of like my opinions of like just saying stuff that I know people will agree with because I know, you know what I mean, just to like be liked essentially, you know what I mean. And then when I got to college, it was just kind of the realization of like, oh, I didn't need to do any of that shit. You know? Yeah, I was just like, oh, I was fine.
Fredonia really changed that
and I think
mindset for a lot of people.
I don't think that's exclusive to Fredonia. It's probably college for a lot of people that
for sure
is not just in your hometown. You know what I mean? For us, I mean, obviously, like just venturing, like you said, 45 minutes south of where we grew up, you know, was enough for us to go, oh, like there's way more to this, and we didn't even have to try that hard to figure it out, you know.
Totally.
And it is laughable to be like, you know, just like, I don't know, I think about like, you know, you were a big part of the TV station, I was more of the radio station, and like both of those places really, I think, attracted like people who were, you know, creative people who were more unique, who were maybe a bit more sensitive, that, you know, would probably drown in South Buffalo, you know? And so I feel like I kind of came in there with this kind of like, I don't know, this like jaded outer shell that I got from growing up there, and you know, meeting these people really kind of helped me like break that down.
Sure.
And be like, oh yeah, like it's totally like, if you're not hurting anybody, you can be however you want to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is like such a simple concept, but like the fact that it took 20 years to get to that, again, I think it just kind of speaks volumes to like where we grew up.
Well, and it's even like little things. I think it kind of goes back to the thing we were originally saying about like being a band, but even with like making friends and stuff, it's being able to like be your authentic self around people who accept you for that, and you accept them for who they are. And I think that is the beautiful thing about going to college, is that you're right. Like all it took was meeting people from even other parts of the state. I mean, it was amazing getting to meet people from other parts of like the country and the world and everything like that. But just getting to meet people who are not from where you are from, who have, I think, in a way, like similar upbringings, or, you know, because we're talking about this in the context of like South Buffalo, West Seneca, but like this applies to everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, especially, dude, I'm, you know, I don't think like, you know, somebody coming to Fredonia from like Bath, New York is coming from this like super accepting progressive place.
Right.
No, I think we all kind of,
it's like you're trying to like break out of the like the bubble pretty much, and then when you get to that point where you kind of break through and you realize that there's other people who have like shared opinions and interest, especially I think interest, like it's such a basic thing, but like even like the music that you like, or like the hobbies that you like,
that was huge for me. Of like in high school, I stopped like listening to a lot of the music that I really loved because like there was nobody else who like listened to it really. And so like I feel like all my friends just only listen to hip hop. So I just was like, all right, I'll listen to hip hop, which I do. I mean, I love hip hop, obviously, like, but when I got to college and like met people who were like, oh no, like we love Blink-182 and The Story So Far and Brand New and Take Back Sunday too. And I'm like, wait, really? Like, I'm like, I didn't know. I thought everybody just stopped.
It's like you find your tribe in that moment.
Yeah,
almost,
exactly. And then it like brings me back to like, it like recenters myself with like, oh, this is actually what I enjoy the most.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I think that especially like really speaks to just the power and the hold that music has with people who really love it, you know? Like I it's just this amazing like unspoken feeling that you get of being able to, whether it's like meeting somebody with like a mutual artist that you really love, or going to a concert and being in a room full of people that you don't know a damn thing about anybody, but you all share this mutual love for this artist or this piece of music or whatever it is, and just feeling, I don't know, man. It's like not to sound corny with it, but it just feels like it makes the world make sense a little bit
for
in
sure.
Those moments. You
know?
know?
Yeah. I agree. I mean, having that, any sort of like sense of community is like the best
huge
feeling in the world. And that is, I will say, like a pretty tough thing that I feel like is kind of hard to figure out in New York specifically. You know, I think about like when I was doing comedy in Buffalo, the best part about it was the community, and that's like what kept me doing it. I think
so tight knit there.
Yeah, it was phenomenal and like really welcoming, and that, you know, I started doing comedy because like it was like winter and I was like depressed and like needed to get out of my house and needed to do something creative, and wasn't really like the musical bone was not really, you know, what I was trying to get at. And you know, I had friends who were doing comedy, so that's how I started doing it. And I just like the community of it was amazing, that like every night of the week, like people who were all, again, people from all different parts of Western New York, or like even other parts, and that have all different views on a lot of things and all different personalities, but like the one thing we really like is like trying to make people laugh, you know what I mean, which was like a really fun thing, and everybody was really supportive. And
that's what I was just gonna say. I think with being not like in it like as a performer, but being close to it obviously through Jen and Jake, you just immediately could tell how supportive everybody was of each other, and that it wasn't like a dog eat dog kind of approach to it. And I mean, that's huge. And I think also too, I'm curious your thoughts on this, because a couple of friends who live here have kind of expressed a similar thing, that it's like, you know, you move to New York and it's like, well, there's all these people here, like you should be able to easily find that. But like it also can be kind of isolating, I would assume too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
because there's just like so many.
and I think that's what it is. I think it's just like an overwhelming
Right.
amount of people,
Right.
and also a lot of people are moving here for the reasons of like achieving something for themselves that they might not necessarily be interested in
building the community that you
right
need,
yeah and having like a group success, you know,
Right.
which I'm sure that does exist, but I think it's kind of hard to find, and that's been you know, I tried to start doing stand-up when I got here, and it was just like I don't know, it's so oversaturated. Like the amount of people, I mean, this is, you know, like the comedy capital of the world, so it's like the amount of people who moved here to try to be comedians is like absurd, and you know, I think this is just like how statistics work. Like most of them are terrible, you know, and most of them, at least in my experience of like of who I've met and stuff, like most of them like are not interested in having any sort of like community. Like they're just like in it for themselves, and like you know, in Buffalo what was cool is like there was like a built-in, you know, there was an actual scene, and like you go to an open mic and there are people there who like want to see live comedy no matter what. And I think here, because the spectrum of talent is so wide, that like anybody here, you can go see like A-list, like top tier comedy at multiple clubs every night of the week.
Of course.
You know, so it's like, so nobody's going to watch open micers perform, because it's like, why would you, when you can go see anybody for like
at a theater or something,
right? Or at these small little clubs too. Like it's so accessible. So these open mics are just all, it's like only comics, you know, who are only there for their own benefit. You know what I mean? So like you're going up doing your 3 or 5 minutes, and you know, half the people aren't paying attention. They're looking at their notes. They're you know, whatever. And so like it's really hard for that reason, and really, you know, has kept me from like being inspired. But at the same time, when you do like start to get into rhythm of it, and like you can make a room full of comics laugh, like that hits way harder than you know, anybody who like is just giving you like sympathy laughs or whatever.
It's got to be the ultimate validation, you know. It's like the
right,
same
exactly,
thing of like a genuine like playing a show with somebody, and then afterwards somebody being like sincerely coming up to you and being
going
like,
out of their way,
that was fucking great,
right?
You know?
Somebody
like,
who's also like who gets it.
It's
like,
better than some, you know, like drunk dude at a show being like,
I
love that,
sick, man. I love the
it's
Strokes.
so good, right. But no, that's interesting, you know. I think that in a way, I'm sure it's probably similar like that with the music scene. Granted, I mean, I've like played here a bunch of times, but haven't like obviously not being like entrenched in it. But I think that's something that like taking it back to like the music side of things, I wish that, and I say this being 29, so like it sounds ridiculous, but like I wish earlier though, like when I was younger, I kind of had more of that mindset. I feel like once I got out of college and like a couple years out was when I really started to be like putting an emphasis on like, you know, in Buffalo, like there's just such a wealth of talent with regard to like bands and artists and stuff like that. And it was like, all right, I can either continue to try and book shows with like the same handful of bands, or I can try and be a part of the solution here of like actually cultivating a community that is based on not trying to get ahead of the next person, but trying to like expose people to like different kinds of music through it. Like I think with like Canetis and Slow Animals, with both the bands, like when I book, like I'm very intentional about that and wanting to make sure that there's like diversity and representation in that, and not just for the sake of doing it, but like because well, even though like obviously it is important to have that, but like more so just the fact that like there's so many talented people and there's also so many good people, and it's like if we all want to be able to succeed, like let's support each other, because if like one of us is going to succeed, then in a way like we all can too. Yeah,
that's the whole idea of like cultivating a scene. Which is you know, which is funny because I feel like that's like in my mind like what New York is in my head, of like thinking of like you know, like the punk scene,
Yeah.
like the New York punk scene, like in like the 70s and 80s, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, where did that go? Like, and I think
even like taking it even a little bit more recent and biased, obviously, but like the early 2000s, like garage rock scene, indie rock scene here was banging.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you know, I think it would be, I haven't really looked for it, so I think it would be ignorant for me to say it doesn't exist, because I'm sure it I'm sure there is certain things that do exist, but I just like haven't found it yet. And I'm just because like you hear about these like huge scenes that were cultivated in New York and through different eras, and it's just like,
and the artists that come out of them.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Like, I think that was a huge thing. Like, I don't know if you haven't, you or anybody listening right now, there's a really, really good book about this concept called Meet Me in the Bathroom. They just came out with a documentary about it.
Oh, cool.
But it's about the early 2000s indie rock scene in New York, and pretty much how between like the Strokes, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, the Moldy Peaches, and then pretty much how like the scene kind of was cultivating, in that like you can kind of like feel it building, you know, whether it's just like going to shows and it starts off that it's like, all right, 20, 30 people at a show, and then word starts to spread a little bit more, and then it's like at any given show it was like they'd have, you know, 100+ people on like a random weeknight if like the Strokes were playing or the Yeah Yeah Yeahs were playing. And the cool thing about that is that it then kind of you go through the progression of like, you know, it kind of starts in like the late 90s and the formation of all these bands kind of getting together, and then in like 2000 is really when it starts. And I think that the great part about it is like, not only are you like building that community and building up these artists and everything like that, but it's cool to then see the like ramifications of that and how that then like was affecting like other bands that were coming up like in New York, but then also in like other parts of like the country and in other parts of the world, and how like that influences the cultivation of like other scenes, I guess, in a way, you know, like I think the New York one is very comparable of like you know, especially around that time, like, because I mean, like the, you know, who were like the Grammy nominees in like 2001, and for like it was like Limp Bizkit and stuff, you know, but like that was like what like rock was, I feel like, a lot at the time. I mean, you had like Red Hot Chili Peppers, but it was like this weird middle gap of like, you know, Nirvana obviously ending in like the like mid 90s, and then you know, you kind of have like the Foo Fighters starting off, but they obviously were not what they are now at that time. And it felt like there was just like a real big gap there, like in terms of like quality rock music. And I personally attribute a lot of where rock music is right now to that scene being cultivated here, because it's like all these bands that come out of it. I mean, even looking at the Strokes, like they very heavily influenced what started to happen in like the UK at that point with like Arctic Monkeys coming out, and like, you know, and who else am I missing here? What's the other one with the Libertines and like bands like that, you know, where they started to like really make a name for themselves because of the influence there. And like looking at like a band like the Killers, who like credit like the Strokes and like this music scene, and like the White Stripes and stuff like that, to really like building that. And so I think that's, again, getting back to the point of like the importance of building that community. It's like, it's good for the community itself, but it's good for the big picture here, because it's like when something hits from that, then that makes somebody else either in your neighborhood or in a place miles and miles away, like something clicks for them, and they're like, well, what if I could do that too? Or what if I put my own spin on this in a way?
Right. I'm wondering, and I'm wondering like if, I feel like it has to be like a generational thing maybe. I don't know. I just like think about, and again, I haven't been there that long to form like an educated opinion on like why it would be, but like, I don't know. It feels very individualistic here. And again, that might just be like a generational thing with like young people now are just like, it's like the YouTube generation of like the me generation of like everybody's trying to, like we were talking about before, just like compete and get ahead and like make it about themselves. And I think like there is a market that we exist in that benefits that.
It's like the brand over the product itself.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's very like, you know, maybe YouTube is even a bit dated for the conversation, but like TikTok or whatever, of like trying to like blow up as an individual online rather than like we were saying, trying to like actually cultivate a community.
Man, and that even, you know, I think that as we're talking about it from like the perspective of like TikTok, there's, I think, a real level of like instant gratification that people seek with that.
Yeah,
and I
definitely.
think that what we'll end up seeing in a few years is like, I don't know, I think from the perspective of like music, like part of, I think, what makes bands successful and throughout history, what has made bands successful, like I think the Beatles are a great example of this, is like you need to like rough it for a little bit.
Yeah.
You need to put the work in. You need to
people
get
are
your ass
skipping
kicked
a lot of
little
steps.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have to go through all of those. And so what I think we'll see in a few years is like some really sad and crazy burnout stories from people that are just like,
I mean, I hope not, but
well, I honestly hope not too.
Yeah.
But I just think of like,
but it would make sense,
right? That you just have people that are so like, you know, I made this one song, or I made this one video, and it like went crazy on TikTok, and now I have like a record deal or something like that. But like those people don't really know like what, because nobody's like prepared for fame, but like being able to go like and understand like the lows of it, I think helps you be able to navigate the highs a lot more.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that you see that a lot with like these cases of people that are just like blowing up like that.
Yeah.
Which like more power to them. Good for them. Like if they were able to crack the code and figure out how to like make a name for themselves, whatever, like that's great. But I don't know. I think that there is very much a, you know, not to sound like old manny or anything like that.
I know,
but
that's the thing that like I fear is
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe I'm just getting, you know, pushing 30 and being a little out of touch.
It could be. It very well could be.
Yeah, like who knows what I mean, nobody can predict the future, you know, but like, I mean, even like at my job, like obviously like I work in the music business, and a lot of like the new artists we're bringing in, like they're all like TikTok artists. They're all artists that are just like blowing up on TikTok. But,
Right.
And, you know, I think there's definitely like legit. I mean, I think the shining example of all of it is like Noah Khan, who is, you know, he was already like a working artist who like had a decent, you know, who had achieved some success, but like through TikTok, through the pandemic, like just completely, skyrocketed. So,
and he's awesome too. He's a talented
and
dude.
he's super talented, and he's just keeps putting out like heaters, and obviously is now collabing with, you know, Zach Bryan, Casey Musgraves, Hosier, like
right. But I think he's a perfect example of having like that substance though, where it's not like your brand.
He
over
didn't
the
come
product.
from nothing.
Yeah,
he wasn't like just an artist that made one song. You know what I mean, he was like a guy who was kind of already in it, and just figured out how to use this platform. And I think that's probably the best like happy medium.
For sure.
Yeah.
That is like the epitome of being able to like adapt with the changes in the industry, because it is
just
very
figuring out how to
rapidly
market
changing.
yourself. Yeah. But that's what I mean is like, I think that is where the focus is shifted. Like you were saying, like the brand of like, you get so, and I don't say this to be like, well, because the music will suffer, because it's like, I don't think it does. Obviously, like Noah Khan is making incredible music, but you know, to the shift of, instead of like being like, let's build people just aren't interested in like building a community around it. You know what I mean? I think it's just more focusing on the brand and the marketing to kind of just like build your personal individual following on the internet, rather than what we look back to and I think romanticize of like a community that would be, you know, considered a scene, which I'm just curious if like maybe those days are done, or maybe the pendulum has just swung so far in one direction and eventually it will have to come back to it. I don't know. That's like part of me that like is hopeful. I'm like, do people care about that? You know what I mean? Is this just, again, us just like being guys who looked up to artists that came from that kind of thing, that like we're just too caught up on that? Like, but is this something that people like would even, people even care about that? You know what I mean? Like in general, like,
I think it's kind of cyclical in a way. Shout out post prom. But
nice.
No, I do think though that sort of thing kind of, it comes and goes, and I think that there's different ways that like the premise of this reinvents itself. I think it's similar to music. I think it's similar to fashion, where it's like something is working at one point and then people find a new way of doing it, but ultimately you always are going to make your way back to the thing from before, I guess. And so part of me wants to believe that, you know what I mean? Like, I guess it's like it's almost like trends, I guess, in a way, you know, where it's like,
that's what
this
I mean
is
by
what's
like the
working.
pendulum swing one way and then eventually it comes back to it.
Right.
Whatever.
And so I think, you know, I want to be optimistic about it, and I do think it is. I don't think that it's this like hopeless, lost thing that like the days of building a community like that are over. And again, I think in a lot of places, you know, us talking about it from the big picture shouldn't discredit the places where people are doing that, because there's probably a lot of people that are like silently digging away at it.
Yeah,
you know?
I think, I mean, I look at like the first thing I think about is like the Buffalo hardcore scene, you know, which is like, I have, you know, I wouldn't consider myself like I was never really part of it. I was more of just like adjacent to it. And you know, obviously we have friends that are part of it that are, you know, seeing success from it, but you know, there's a lot of Buffalo hardcore bands that they've cultivated this scene. And a lot of these bands are starting to see like success outside of the scene, like exactly what we were talking about, like the same formula of like a scene got cultivated and people were like, oh, I just want to be part of this. I just want to start a band for the sake of being part of this cool thing that's happening right now. And from that, getting success like anyway.
It's how you attract the fans too. It's how you attract people to want to be a part of it. And
people just see like there's like Buffalo hardcore itself has a brand. Where it's like people are going to go to a show just because it's a Buffalo hardcore show. You know, and
you want to be a part of it. I think I
just think there's way more value in that. Going back to us talking about like the importance of being like authentic and like real and like, I don't know. My mind has been focused lately on the idea of just like being part of a community.
For sure.
A thing that I talked about last week that I said you're gonna hear me say a million times is that, you know, we're a tribal species, and we really like, there is like just this sense of like home we get from being in a community, and I think mixing that with like creative expression is like just fucking beautiful.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, and I think that is way more important to me than like, you know, obviously we all want to be successful for it. We all have to pay the bills and everything. It would be nice to like not have to work and have that be our jobs. But you know, I don't know. I think there's just, to me, I would find way more value, and I think it makes you a better artist. You know what I mean? When you have this, especially 100%. This like friendly competition and like inspiration to each other. You know what I mean? Of like somebody putting out, if you're in this kind of scene, somebody puts out like a really good record that like inspires you to like want to write a really good record, and then like
totally,
you know,
that's like the healthy pushing that we were talking about before.
I think of like the Beatles and the Beach Boys. It was like the best example of that, is like these two bands that like admired each other and just kept trying to top each other. You know what I mean? And
Beatles are like, here's Rubber Soul, and then Beach Boys are like, here's Pet Sounds, and then Beatles are like, here's Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's, you know, because they wanted to top each other.
When the Beatles put out when the Beach Boys put out Pet Sounds, I think it was Paul McCartney that was like, I don't even know why we should try after this. You know what I mean? But then they wrote Sgt.
Brian
Pepper.
Wilson said the same thing after Sgt. Pepper's.
And then he spent a year in his bed.
But no, it's crazy. And I think the last thing I'll say too, just to kind of, I guess, put a cap on this part of the conversation, is I think that a huge part of, and to use the word again, but like being an artist is like, you do kind of have to really be intentional with wanting to like form relationships. Like for me, like after shows and stuff like that, even if it is, you know, Slow Animals is playing at like Good Bar or something on Halloween, and you do get those people coming up to you who are like wasted but are like, dude, I really love that was so fun, blah blah blah. Like it's important still to like talk to those people and to like try to make friends with people, make people feel welcomed. I mean, my God, like there's a ton of people that like come to Slow Animal shows or Canetis shows that like I met through them, seeing us once, talking to them afterwards, follow each other on social media, or they follow us on social media, keeping in touch and talking to them repeatedly after shows. And like it just happened. We just played Mr. Goodbar, Slow Animals about like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there was this crew of probably like 5 or 6, you know, people, like a few guys, a few women in their like, I'd say like mid early 20s, and they came up to us when we were out on the patio and we're like, oh man, like really had a lot of fun tonight, like this is like our 5th or 6th time seeing you. And I had like never seen a few of these people before in my life, but just like then talking to them after the fact and like chatting with them, getting to know about them, and like not just like only talking about the band, but like, you know, just approaching it like a normal fucking human being,
Right.
like having an experience with somebody, you know, it makes them feel like, okay, this person like really appreciates the fact that I'm here, like I want to come and see them again. And then you
Right.
start to see those people more and more, and like, you know, so that's, you know, Grace, my girlfriend, kind of like always messes with me about it, because I do that after every show, where you kind of have to like play the game a little bit, and you do have to like talk to people, but it's like,
right, and you
you're
want to
not-
show gratitude.
Yeah,
I mean, you're like,
right.
dude, you took time out of your day. You
paid
spent
to
your
come and
Friday
see
or
me.
Saturday
Yeah.
night and your money that you
Yep.
like you work all week for to
Right.
come like listen to what I created.
This
like,
is how
that
you want to blow off steam. Like you want to support me by like that.
Right.
That's the
best
incredible.
feeling in the world.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And you have to do that. You have to show that, and like it's not like a surface level like checking off the box of like saying thank you. Like it. That shit
No, I
means
would
a
feel. I would
lot.
just feel like terrible if I
Right.
didn't. You know what I mean? And
Right.
Yeah, it's the best, dude. Like when Post Prom played our, you know, I don't even know what to call it. Not a farewell show, because I don't think Post Prom's going to be done forever. But
We're chilling for a little bit show.
yeah. So I basically like, I'm moving to New York. You're not going to hear from us for a while.
Yeah.
This show, like, dude, like packed Mohawk place out like
Yeah.
front to back, and it was just like and like I'm about to be. It was a crazy feeling of being like, I'm leaving this. I'm
Yeah.
choosing to leave this.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and yeah, so that's wild. But yeah, the you have to be grateful and
Oh yeah.
of
Well,
that kind
and
of
that's
stuff.
even part of the fun of it too. Like, I don't know. I mean, we just, you know, as you had mentioned at the top of the episode, like we just put out our new record and had a really cool release party. Have you ever been to Forbes Theater and 500 Pearl?
Yeah, but for like a work conference,
Dude.
that was the most like corporate jerk off fucking dumb thing I had ever been to. So
not exact. It's pretty similar vibes to our release show. Yeah. No, but we, you know, like that was like a perfect example where like, I don't know, like along with obviously like the gratitude of it and like expressing it to people, I think like internalizing it is really important too. I mean, there were several moments on stage where it's like we're in this huge theater. There's like people on a balcony. They're like the floor itself is pretty filled in, and like just looking out and being like, damn, like all like these people are just here to like support me and support the thing that I care about, or they on the other side of it just like really like the thing that I care about so much. And it's like not only like how can you not like romanticize something like that, but how can you not like be infinitely grateful that like there's people that like aren't your family or aren't your friends and like don't have like a like not a requirement but like a motivation to like come and see you because they feel like there's like an obligation or something like that. It's like if somebody legitimately enjoys something that I care about so much and put so much of myself into to the fact that like they want to support it just because they like it,
right,
not because they feel like they need to support me, but because they like the thing.
Yeah.
That is the coolest shit ever. And like, absolutely, you have to show appreciation for that and gratitude.
Totally.
You know?
I think even the same of like playing in a cover band is also like I mean, you have Slow Animals, which is the Strokes cover band, and like I have Lacking in the Bulge, which is the Blink cover band, and like, you know, both of us started these cover bands just because we fucking love this band, and playing these songs are so fun,
right?
And then you play them for people who are like, yeah, we fucking love this band too.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like a bonding moment over that.
It's amazing. You know? And I think another cool side of that too is like I have always, and now like Slow Animals, we've like expanded. We do like a lot of Arctic Monkeys.
Sure.
We do a
yeah,
lot
you
of
kind of
Killers,
have to.
Yeah, yeah.
When we're booking up shows for like Lacking the Bulge, we don't play that often, you know, once or twice a year. But when we would like, and someone wanted to play for like 2 hours, we're like, dude, even like, we don't want to listen to Blink songs for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like, so you have to kind of
right.
Yeah.
You know, but I think it's really cool because just as fun as it is to be able to share that with people who like it, I think what I even appreciate so much more is like the amount of people that have come up to me like after a show or like I see them out somewhere or something and are like, I saw you guys a few times. Admittedly, like prior to listening to you, I did not know. I knew Last Night by the Strokes, or I knew Fluorescent Adolescent by Arctic Monkeys, and like seeing you guys made me fall in love with this band. And like that is like as gratifying as I think anything else. Like even I think it's even comparable to like original music in the sense because it's like you started to like a band because my cover band like introduced you to the song, and like
Right.
that was good enough that it made you want to like find like whether the root of it or like the
Right,
source of it and
yeah.
everything, and like that
And
has
also,
been,
yeah, what a compliment to
Oh.
you as like a fan of the band and being
Oh,
like, I was
yeah.
able to properly like transcend this.
oh my god,
This
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
and that's even kind of, I think it's funny because now you can even take this back to the conversation with regard to how we were saying with growing up in like South Buffalo and West Seneca,
Yeah.
and not knowing people who like our music taste. You know, I often do think back to that where it's like, you know, I was like 14 and like over the moon about like the Strokes and the Beatles and Oasis, and thinking back to that younger version of me who just like longed for being able to have people to share that music with, to now be able to share it in a way that it's like, I'm not just saying like, hey, you should go listen to this band, like I'm playing the music and that's making people want to listen to the band.
right.
I mean, it just, I don't know, like how it's very, very, very fulfilling, and I'm very, very grateful for it. And it's like, I oftentimes like, and I know we're talking about this like relative to like Buffalo and like the scene there and everything.
For sure, but
I
mean,
often like really stop and like appreciate
Dude, the slow
how
an-
far we've come, like especially with Slow Animals. Man,
the
we
Slow
played
Animals shows are so fun.
They're
I
crazy.
don't even like listen to the Strokes or like that's just like I think just like a scene that I just kind of missed. Like,
Yeah.
but I still obviously have an appreciation for it. But like whenever I could, like if it made sense to, I would go to those shows, like especially at Good Bar, dude. And it's so fucking fun to just like see this bar full of people just like, you know, even if they don't know every song, like you'll do
Yeah.
Mr. Brightside or something.
yeah, or the
and-
Sweet Escape by Gwen Stefani.
yeah,
It ain't
yeah.
count-
And people just go absolutely nuts for it.
They go
and like they're
crazy.
filming it and they're with their group of friends and they're drunk and they're screaming to each
Yeah.
other, you know? And it's just like way better than just a jukebox. You know what I mean? Like
that is very kind of you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
No, it's super fun.
It's cool, you know, and it started off as really that thing where, like you said, it's like you love the band and whatever, but like I reminiscing on it and stuff. Like I'm even just thinking about like our last year. Like we've played like 3 or 4 Sabres games. We played the Party
Yeah,
in the
that's super
Plaza
cool.
for the Bandits championship winning clinching game in the NLL finals. Like we have just had all of these like
super cool opportunities.
crazy opportunities,
Yeah.
and it's like, dude, this all just started because like I like the Strokes way too much.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah,
Like,
exactly. And I just
now
wanted
we're
to-
here.
yeah.
It's really crazy, and it's exciting. Like
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun, and you know, I'm just grateful for it, and I'm grateful that people have been receiving it in the way that they have. And
Dude, your grind is insane with like the amount of shows that you guys do play. Like how many shows are you playing a month between all of the projects that you do?
I would say like 2 to 4 usually.
Yeah,
which
that's wild.
Is a lot. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and it ebbs and flows. Like, you know, it's funny because it's like the summertime always is like usually like pretty busy. This
Sure.
past summer we just had like a lot of schedule conflicts, travel and stuff like that. But like, you know, we're getting into like a really busy season now where like we do Good Bars like their Halloween, Thanksgiving Eve, and New Year's Eve shows, and then we have a couple of Sabres
Dude,
games.
that's
we're doing,
that was the one
and
I was thinking of. Thanksgiving Eve
Oh,
when I went to Good
man.
Bar and watched the Slow Animal show. It was so fun.
It was
Yeah.
those ones are crazy.
Yeah.
I'm very glad to be on stage in those because those like the crowd is just it's mobbed in there. It's nuts. But yeah, so I'd say usually about like that much. And you know, I play bass in a band, Pink Droid, which is my buddy Terrell, like his kind of alias that he goes by for his stuff. And yeah, I'd say like anywhere from like 2 to 4, and you know, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's cool. Like there's definitely times where it's like very draining, admittedly. But I just think that like, I don't know, I think I'm in a point now where like these past few years, and really since like Canetis and Slow Animals have started to do better, that like I am aware of the fact that like I have come a long way as an artist and have really improved like over the years from like when I started to now, which is a part of I think the whole like life cycle of being an artist or being a musician, whatever, is like kind of looking back and being like, damn, I sucked, but I kind of had to suck to get to this point.
Absolutely, dude.
And
that is
yeah, it just feels like
That's
now,
everything,
yeah,
yeah.
and that's the thing though, is that now these past couple of years specifically, like really coming out of like when things started to like come back up after the pandemic, it feels like for the first time in my life that it's like really paying off.
Yeah,
Like I
that's
feel
awesome.
like it's the blood, sweat, and tears of over the years, the friends made, the friends lost, the like time that has gone into it, the money that's gone into it. It feels like now both of the bands are at a place that like it feels worth it. It feels like all of that work has kind of like led up to this moment, and now I'm actually being able to like have like legitimate success with it, to the point now that like, like Slow Animal shows and everything like that, like we do really well. Like being an original band, like you have to invest, like the money you make a lot of times goes back into the band.
Right.
Whereas now with like the cover bands, like we don't have merch, we don't have like recording to pay for, we don't have any of that.
Yeah, it's all profit.
And it's nice, and it's like, I don't know, it's a very cool thing now that it feels like there was a lot of heartache. There was a lot of like times where I would just like look in the mirror and be like, God, like, do I really love this that much that I want to keep putting myself through this? And now it just feels like it's gotten to a point that like I've reached the payoff now, and I can just like, in addition to just like working my ass off with like managing the bands and booking and doing all of our marketing and stuff like that, and then playing the shows itself, like I'm actually able to like just like enjoy it. Like it's not like it has to be like a job. Like it's like I'm reaping the rewards of like the work that I'm putting in.
I also think it's crazy that I was talking about this with you last night, that you're such a night owl. Because last night you texted me and were like, yeah, we're going to go to dinner, and then we're going to go out for drinks. And I was like, perfect, let me know. And then it was like 10 p.m. and I'm like, oh, they must not be going anymore. And then you text me at like 10:30. You're like, hey, we're just finishing up dinner. And I was like, that's insane, dude. And then this morning you come by and I go, you want to go grab a coffee? And you're like, I don't drink coffee. And I just think about all the things that you do. And I'm just like, how do you have energy ever?
It's hard. It's the coffee thing is really, I think, what like stumps a lot of people, because like it's like the 3 bands and then like my podcast, and then work is very busy and like travel intensive and stuff, and
you just have insane energy.
I think I just like force myself through it in a way. Like I don't know. I think this is something that like, especially through like my journey with just like dealing with like my mental health and like a lot of just like personal stuff that I've experienced over the past few years, and really kind of like getting serious about like taking care of myself with like my mental health and everything like that, is that like now I feel like I've learned to, because I'm so active with stuff that like requires me to be out and about or doing things or around people, like I've really learned to value alone time, and I've really learned to value just like
resetting,
being a piece of shit and laying on my couch for an entire day playing video games, and being like, I'm 29 years old, but like I need this to be able to like go and do the rest of the things of my life, you know? It's so important. You got to be able to, I think that's really how I'm able to, is that like I have spurts where like it could be like 3 weeks straight where it's like I'm recording the podcast twice a week, I got a show every weekend, I have a band practice in the middle, I have like meetings for stuff that I'm like on boards of or whatever, and I have all of that, and then I'll just need like 48 hours to just do nothing and to just like turn my brain off a little bit, take a little bit of time to kind of like decompress and like reflect on like stuff, how I'm feeling, and just like you said, like recharge pretty much. And then I get like the next burst, and it's like, all right, I could do this for a few more weeks, and then I need to like do that again. And so I think it's just, I'm the kind of person that I do not I don't do well with like in the context of music, I guess, for example, like I'm not the best guitar player. I love playing guitar. I've never been one though that like, partially because I never really took like real lessons, I guess, but like I never, not as nearly as much as I wanted to, like sit down and like practice a bunch, or like I like to read a lot. I say I like to read a lot, but I only do it like I'll get into a book and I'll read a lot for like 2 weeks, and then
dude, I just finished a book that I have up on my shelf there that was, I think it was 150 pages, and it took me like 2 months to read it.
Yeah, see, exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. And so it's like with stuff like that, like I like in theory I like the ideas of things, but like really what it comes down to is that like I just need to like force myself to do something. Like with like vocals, for example, like I started I took vocal lessons for like a while, like, and I stopped about like a year and a half, 2 years ago, just because my teacher stopped like teaching. But like with that, like that was something that it's like I need to like have that structure to like continuously like practice, like force myself to, like I'm not good about like sitting at home and like practicing by myself, like I try to be better with that.
Yeah.
But like when it comes to then like other stuff with like booking and like playing shows or doing this or that, it's like I like to like make the commitment so that I know it's coming, and then that makes me have to do it.
Absolutely.
Rather than having like the downtime.
Having a deadline is like insane.
Right.
How like motivating that
Oh,
is. Yeah.
100%.
Dude, and that is another thing I think I've been struggling with here. It's like I have so many like creative ambitions. I was telling you last night, like I want to write a screenplay really bad. I have this like movie idea that I think would be really cool. And even if it like doesn't come to fruition, just the idea of like writing it and just like getting it out would be an achievement in itself. Yeah, and I like struggle to like make myself do it. You know what I mean? Because it's like there's no reason to. Or no, like I don't have any like forced commitment or anything.
Sure. And that's the thing is like that. I think people really need that. Like
Yeah.
I know I'm the kind of person that does. I know so many people though who like are very good about like Mike Baller's a perfect example. That dude can like just sit down and just rip guitar like practice for like an hour and just like get so much out of it.
There was a time, dude, when I moved here, I did not pick up. I have 2 guitars here. I didn't pick it up for months.
Yeah.
Because I just like was not feeling it, and also that I think this city is just kind of overwhelming. And
Yeah,
like,
a little bit.
I kind of just like
you have a good excuse.
I got to a point now where it's like, all right, it's October. You know what I mean? It'll be a year in January. I might as well just like chalk this year up as like, all right, we didn't really do anything that creative, and that's fine because it was just like your first year in a new city, and like I giving myself a lot of grace.
Man.
Yeah. And like this is my first time living alone as well. You know what I mean? Which is a big adjustment.
How's
and
that
like,
been?
Dude, it's awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
It's fucking
it is
awesome.
the best.
Coming like, I have 5 brothers. Me and my little brother shared a bed for the first 10 years of my life. And then I shared a room until I was 15. Got my own room at 15. And like, but still like lived among 3 or 4 other people, and then roommates all through college.
Right.
And then I just was like, I just want like my own space. But what's funny, doing another full circle thing here.
Oof, give it to me.
Talking about community. I heard a take recently about living alone and how it's like such an American thing because like we're such an individualist society that we have been kind of robbed of knowing how to live among other people. Like because we have been curated to be these very individualistic people that have like our very like we highly value our living spaces like how we want to live, that we're not willing to sacrifice that for other people because that's what like living in a community gives you.
Sure.
And I just thought that was a really interesting take, that like the reason we like it's such an American thing to like want to live by yourself is because like we kind of our culture has kind of like removed us from like knowing how to live like in harmony with other people.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. But with all that said, I fucking love living by myself.
Yeah, dude, of
no,
course.
it's super cool to just like set things up my way. And I'm like a very particular person where like I'm, very clean and organized and like not having to live among anybody else's like I don't know, just how having to like adjust myself. And this probably goes back to like how we were saying like how we grew up. Like I always kind of just had to like adjust myself to everybody else, and I put everybody else's needs above mine like my entire life. So to actually like, I mean, moving to New York in and of itself was me doing that, of going, you know what, I'm putting me first for once.
As you should.
And then living alone, you know what I mean? I don't think I want to live alone forever, but at least for right now, like this is just a perfect reset for me to go, what does it look like if I just put myself first for everything? You know what I
think
mean?
that
And like,
everybody at some point should live alone in large part because again, I think it is important like for people to be able to put yourself first. I mean, that's like the healthiest way of being able to do it, of being able to
absolutely.
like find that sense of like individualism and find that sense of like self-sufficiency.
Right. You just learn a lot about yourself, and it gives you,
do.
it gives you just like this core, this like really strong sense of self, of like knowing like how you, especially in a new place.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like moving here alone was just like the best way for me to really feel like confident about like what I value and like what I want. It was really tough at the same time. You know what I mean? It like
the transition. It's not like you can just like do it. I mean, I've lived alone now for 3 years, and it is. I'm with you that like I felt like I learned a lot about myself. I feel like it really brought out a lot of mature and good things like within myself that I think needed to be brought out at that time in my life. And yeah, I mean it's just the perfect way of being able to like kind of get to just like understand yourself better.
Yeah, it's awesome. Looking inward is so important, and I feel like so many people just don't do that. You know what I mean? And I think it just this self-awareness is everything, and I think self-awareness at the same time I think is only half the battle. You know, you can be self-aware that you're a dick and still be a dick. You know? So yeah, I don't know. This is so I don't know, going back to the idea of like my putting myself through kind of that process, and also like coming off of like the second half of my 2022 was just fucking insane of like touring and you know, just a lot of different things that were all going on at once, and like I was just kind of in survival mode, and while in that mode was like, I'm gonna move to New York City, and then got here and just like everything just went and just like slowed down, and I was like, oh, I'm here now. You know, so I think when I was trying to like still be creative and like write songs or write anything, you know what I mean? I'm like, I have nothing to say right now. You know, I think I just kind of like,
but it's brewing though.
Yeah. Right. Like, I think I need to just accept that like I have nothing to say right now, and just kind of sit back and just observe and just like take note of what's going on, and eventually just trust that like it'll come back, and like I'll be able to.
Well, and it will. I mean that, especially in terms of like songwriting, that in and of itself is something that, you know, like writer's block is like a real thing, or like having like moments where like you're like just humming and like firing on all cylinders, and it feels like the stuff is just like it's just coming out of you, and you just like it's writing itself in a way almost. And then there's other times where, dude, like just nothing is there, like nothing's coming out, you know. And it's not that you don't want to or that you're like closed off, it's just sometimes it's just like a tricky bastard like that, you know. Especially
I think for us, I think you and I are similar songwriters in that we write very autobiographically, as you were saying. Like it's very much we're writing about our real life experience and being vulnerable, and like but what I like have gotten to is like I'm like, well, that's not always how I have to write, you know what I mean? Like, so that's like I've been doing, I was telling you last night, I'm like I'm kind of ghost writing, quote unquote, for another band in Buffalo right now that I'm like writing their lyrics and their vocal parts. And that's been really cool because I'm not writing autobiographically. I'm just like writing, like kind of like putting myself in the shoes of the vibe of that project, and just being like, oh, what would be a cool thing to say? Like not necessarily like what I feel about something, but just like what I think would just like fit this, you know? So like putting myself in that creative space is just like, and realizing that like you don't have to like, it doesn't have to be like this like super authentic, like this is what I experienced thing. It can just be like almost like writing a fiction novel,
dude. It's so
like writing of like a character, like create this character, and like how does that character feel?
I think that's a great point, because I think something that I've learned really through Canetis, and it helps me get through those moments where I'm in like a dry spell or whatever, is like, because of the fact that, yes, I agree, I also like definitely write a lot of times, you know, from like my own perspective on things. I've tried to really kind of expand my horizons when it comes to like lyric writing in that sense. Like, for example, on our last EP, our second EP, Chasing Moonlight, we have a song called Balancing Act, which is one of the singles from that one. And that song, I was like, you know what, I want to like try to like really force myself to like write from different perspectives, or even like you had mentioned, writing from the perspective of like another person. And so that song it's a song, it's about Star Wars. I was like, I want to write a song about like a movie or something, or like a character or something like that, and writing it like what would like an angsty, because it's like it's from
In
the
the Star
perspective
Wars
of like
universe.
Anakin
Yeah,
Skywalker,
yeah.
and like
Oh, I
that
love
dude
that.
is so angsty.
Yeah.
And so it's like, all right, how can I write
love
these
that,
like
dude.
very
That's
kind
awesome.
of like angsty lyrics and like to go along with this kind of like rock and like alt punky kind of
Right,
like
right.
song.
Yeah.
And so that was like a really fun experience
Yeah.
for me because it was like, obviously,
Like
I mean,
if somebody
I love
would have
Star
just given
Wars,
Anakin
but-
Skywalker a pen instead of a lightsaber to murder a bunch of children with,
Let's go. Let's get into this now. Oh, the power. How about a therapist instead of Jedi training?
Yeah,
huh?
come on, Anakin.
But yeah, like so it was a really cool experience, like doing that and going like kind of putting myself in those shoes, not from like the genocidal maniac, but like the human inside of that and really like what that is and like the tragedy of like his life and his story and like how it was just kind of like like the chorus of the song is behind this mask hides who I want to be and I'm torn between the light and the dark.
Yeah.
What's in my mind can't be freed. All I want is you and me, him
Right.
and Padme.
Yeah,
Wake
yeah,
me
yeah.
up because it's over. And it's like, I don't know,
Yeah,
putting
that's fire. Yeah.
like putting yourself in somebody else's shoes
Yeah.
when it's like and
but
I
at
want
the
to do
same
that
time,
again.
somebody who doesn't know that can hear that song and go, "Oh, I relate to this."
Bingo.
You know what I mean?
And
Yeah.
that is what is so cool. Like that's
Right.
been really
That's-
cool.
I just watched going back to Hosier again. I've been just really into him lately, and his new album I think is awesome. And I listened to it like once all the way through when it came out, and I was just like, okay, it's cool. I don't know, if I'm really fucking with it all that much. And then I watched an interview about it's a concept album. I found out that like he wrote based on like reading Dante's Inferno and just reading about like the
Oh shit.
circles of hell, and like each song is about like from the perspective of like a different character in this like old English poem or whatever. And I'm like, damn, what a fucking fun like prompt to
Yeah.
like take this like really old and like outside of music, who's that director, Mike Flanagan, who he did like Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor,
Okay,
Midnight Mass, and now he's got this new show, The Fall of the House of Usher. And he does all these Netflix shows, but they're all based on like another thing that's like he like will go find like these really old like 17th century stories and just like use that and just like the base of all of it and just like build something new off of it. And like that's what all of his stories are. And it's like that is such a cool idea that it's like not everything has to come out of thin air.
Yeah.
Like not everything has to be this brand new like
Right.
thing about like your individual experience. You know what I mean? Like you can just like take something that's existed forever that people might not even know about it and let it inspire you to like, just for the sake of like doing something creative to try to spark another thing. You know what I mean?
And yeah, I mean, I think being able to like one of the things that I love that I've actually been starting to, I have a cool podcast I'm going to recommend, but like getting into how you can kind of like look at the world around you independent of your own experience,
Yeah.
and be able to write about that. So there's a new podcast called McCartney: A Life in Lyrics.
Oh,
where
I saw something about it. I think it got recommended to me on some app. Yeah.
Need to check this out, Aiden.
It doesn't take much convincing for me to do something with
Beautiful.
the Beatles.
So it's hosted by this guy. He's an Irish poet, Paul Muldoon, and it's him and Paul. They go through each episode's about 20 minutes, and they talk about pretty much like damn near line by line the lyrics of like one song per episode. And one that was really like the first episode is about Eleanor Rigby, which is so
One
cool.
of my favorites. Yeah.
Second episode though is about back in the USSR, and Paul goes into how like the song itself is like a parody of, at the time, you have the Beach Boys are doing like
Surfing USA. Yeah.
Chuck Berry had a song called Back in the US, like
Right.
all this stuff that's like promoting like a lot of like that like 60s US capitalism kind of thing.
Right, American
And-
Pride.
yeah, exactly. And so Paul, we're the Cold War and everything, and
Yeah.
he looks at it and he's like, all right, what if I wrote like this kind of tongue-in-cheek song from the perspective of
I
a
love the
man
Soviet Union.
who's from the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
who was living in the West and is like, oh, I just want to get back. And so
Right.
the first line of the song is flew in from Miami Beach, BOAC, didn't get to bed last night.
Yeah.
And it's about like, oh my God, this guy, like, he can't wait. And then it goes through and it's like talking about like in the pre-chorus, for example, where it's like the Ukraine girls really, and he goes through country by country, and in the background of that he's got John and George doing the Beach Boys woo,
Yeah.
And so it's just like incredible. And then in the it's like I believe it's the second chorus, he does where it's like back in the US, back in the US, back in the USSR. Like it's just so cool. I feel like how people are able to just with so much intention be able to like pull from like real world stuff that, like, again, he's writing from the perspective of a Soviet guy who is like, ugh, I've had enough of the West. I want to get back to the cold of the Soviet Union. You know, leaving Miami and being like, thank goodness I'm out of here now. I'm going back home finally. Like, that is like so fucking good. Like the tongue in cheek, the like just digging into that a little bit, and like especially too at a time that, like, again, I mean, not that either of us were alive in the 60s, but like it was very much like on that kind of like very like Americanized, westernized like culture and stuff like that,
and like definitely like anti-communist propaganda.
Very much so,
like
and especially I think it's interesting from the Beatles' perspective, because he talks about this in the episode that they loved the fact that through the 60s that Beatles records had to get like smuggled, and that the only way you could listen to them was like if you went into like a cellar of a bar, or like in like the back room somewhere that, like, you know, where somebody like snuck them in somehow, like through an import or whatever. And so I think that kind of like even lends to like the tongue-in-cheekness even further, that it's like they're writing about this from the perspective of like a guy that like would never even be able to like go to a store and pick up a Beatles record anyways, you know? It's good stuff. But
it's super fun to realize, like, you know, I even think like looking at, you know, the new Blink-182 record that just came out, like, what's so funny is like I am this guy who like very much loves like intentional, authentic, like meaningful lyrics, but like my favorite band is Blink-182, who's like really just like, they're not even like, I don't know, these guys are in their 50s and they're putting out these songs that are just like, to them, like, are just like, oh, I think this would be fun. Like, this would just be a fun theme to write about that I think people would like. You know what I mean? They're not really talking, it's not autobiographical. It's not necessarily, I mean, there are some songs, but it's like, for the most part, it's just like, they're just trying to like create a vibe that is just like cool and fun that like people could relate to. And I think that is just like super fun as well.
You know what I mean? I don't really mess with Blink that much. Like, I know that, like, I mean, you and like a lot of my friends are like really all
how
about
I
it.
am with the Strokes is how you are with Blink.
Exactly. But that's the thing though, is that like I definitely have a respect for that it's just like they know what they like, they know what they want to do, and they're just gonna do that, like, and which is really cool, you know. I that's another thing that I think is so interesting to talk about, is like how some artists very much like either stay in their lane or they find their niche and they kind of stick with it, as compared to artists that are like, okay, we got really famous from doing this particular thing, I want to go and do something completely different now to try and challenge myself. Because I think that both are equally valid, equally very cool, but I think like the dynamic of that is very interesting, you know. I think that in both instances, you can look at like a band, like let's say like Coldplay, for example. I think of Coldplay as a band that, like, when they start out, like their first like 3 or 4 albums are unreal. Parachutes, their debut album, I think is one of the best debut albums of the 21st century. Like Viva La Vida is a great album. Like they really good stuff. Then they got to a point where they realized that they wanted to shift gears and lean into this like way more like synthy pop stuff, and it's like, ugh, like it just like it loses what like the original, I guess, like special element of the band is, you know, by them trying to, I guess, like foray into this new kind of sound. Whereas you look at a band like, you could even say like, you know, the Strokes, I think, for example, are a cool one, where like first 2 albums, very, very garage rocky. They get to their 3rd album and you can kind of feel like the shift starting there. And then by the time they get to, you know, like their 4th and 5th albums, like they've completely changed. Like their 5th album, Come Down Machine, is like so, you listen to that and you're like, this is not the same band that made As the Sit.
Right.
And then they get to their most recent album, which they won a Grammy for in 2020, The New Abnormal, and they were able to find the way to blend together what makes like that kind of like signature guitar alt garage rock sound with like a lot of these like new wave influences and like synthy influences, and finding out how to find that kind of like happy medium. And then I feel like Blink is one of those bands that has like very much stayed the course with like their sound. And I mean, Christ, they're one of like the biggest bands like out there right now, and like it clearly like that is working for them, you know. And it just the psyche. But then there's other bands where it's like you just keep doing the same thing, and it's like, come on, like give me something like a little different here. It's just funny how like it's a weird kind of line to toe, where it's like in some senses it's like, yes, I want this band to like go out and do something crazy that I wouldn't expect, and then other ones where it's like, no, just like get back to like what makes you cool. Like I feel that way about Arctic Monkeys right now, even, where like I loved their progression, their first 5 albums. Their first 2 albums are great, like very like just like driving guitar sounds, all rock sounds. Then they get into like a little bit more of like a darker vibe or whatever on their next 2 records, and then you get to their 5th record, AM, which is the one that everybody knows the bangers from, and it's like them kind of like blending those elements where it's like those like darker guitar sounds with like a lot of the very like kind of pop driven melodies. And now at their past 2 records, especially their last one, I liked Tranquility Base, but kind of it had to grow on me. But like their most recent record, The Car, it's just like, dude, it's just like you're just trying to write like a parody of yourself almost at this point or something, and it doesn't feel like authentic, I guess, in a way. Like the way I compare it to is like how like in the, bringing it back to the Beatles, like in whatever it was, like 66, 67, like there was like news reports that like college classes were teaching about like the Beatles lyrics, like English classes were like focused on, like would have like classes about it. And John Lennon thought that was so ridiculous that he wrote I Am the Walrus, which if you go through those lyrics, it is absolute nonsense. Like he wrote that in response to that. And so I feel like Alex Turner is kind of in this moment right now where like, and I could totally be wrong, but like it just to me feels like, you know, I view him as, in my opinion, like the best lyricist of our generation. I think if you go back through those first 5 Arctic Monkeys records, it's just like on another level. Like I've never, like the poetic nature of it is just like so powerful and beautiful and like clever and like cheeky and all of that. And I think now it's like AM was so big for them and they got so much like mainstream and commercial success that after that, his response to that was like, all right, well, now I feel like I need to like try something different just for the sake of it, or I need to be this like almost like parody of him, or this character, I guess, in a way, when it's like, I don't know, it's just, I feel like they're straying away from like what makes them like such a special band, I guess. It's the dynamic of that is just with any band is just like so interesting to me.
I do want to push back on the comment that Blink has been doing the same thing forever, because
really, okay.
I mean, I feel like I could do an entire episode about, or I could do an entire podcast of itself about like the progression of Blink, but I mean, you have an album like Dude Ranch, which, you know, has songs like Damn It and Josie, which are just very much like fast punk songs that Mark sings these very like simple melodies on, and then, you know, the Enema of the State is the very like well polished mainstream record, and that's where you get songs like What's My Age Again, and you get All the Small Things. Take Off Your Pants and Jacket is pretty much just like a second version of that, but then the self-titled is where you get a song like I Miss You, you get a song like Feeling This that is like completely different from anything they had been doing before. That's way more like pop oriented, that they tried to put this like mall emo spin on, that they lost a bunch of fans when they made that record. Now, I mean, I think like, you know, that like the mainstream success of that album, you know, is like, if you don't know like the lore of Liquid-82, like you just like, that's what I think a lot of people know as the Blink sound, is that album. But they were doing a completely different thing before that. And then I think the most recent record that they just put out kind of really does blend a lot of like all 4 of those albums together.
I love that,
you know what I mean? So
I think that's really cool with like artists who are able to, and my bad on that, I appreciate you calling me on that, but I think that's really cool with artists that are ones that like we grew up with, or were kind of like those 90s and early 2000s artists that, you know, they have their sound or whatever. And it's similar, I feel like, how you just described that. Their most recent one is kind of similar to the Strokes' most recent album, where it's like they're able to take that initial kind of force that they were, that made them so special, that people fell in love with them, and then blend that with like the rest of the journey up until this point to kind of make the sound of what it is now. And I think that that's great. I think that I wish that there was like more bands that were really able to do that and not just kind of either like go way too off base or try to just like stay within a box, I guess, you know, like it's nice when bands are
finding
able to
the balance,
that blend that like feels like a healthy mix of both.
Something new and creative, but like still stays true to what the band sound is. Yeah.
Damn, I love that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very, very cool.
Thanks.
That's you're a cool guy.
Listen, man, I think what we just figured out is we're both just huge nerds.
An hour's worth of just figuring out we're a couple
with
of music
the amount
dorks.
of like Lincoln Strokes talk alone is like we are just huge fanboy nerds of these things.
I wouldn't change it.
Could talk about it forever. Brendan, thanks for coming on,
dude. It's my pleasure.
Check out Canetis, the new EP. Check out Slow Animals if you're in Buffalo, the Strokes cover band. What's the name of the Sabres podcast?
Straight Up Sabres.
Straight Up Sabres. If you're a Buffalo Sabres fan, all things Sabres. It's been a tough start to the
it's not
season,
been ideal,
but it's a long season. There's a lot of games. I'm still hopeful.
82 game season, not a 4-game season. We got some time here. We're gonna be all right.
Absolutely.
I think they're gonna be able to turn it around. So.
For sure. Brendan, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity being on. You know, I've always been a big supporter of you, whether it's music or comedy or any of your endeavors. And
likewise.
Obviously, you know, was so stoked when you started the podcast way back when. And, you know, I'm psyched to be able to be on right now. I was very much looking forward to this when you asked me. So I appreciate you asking me. And, you know, like I said, my man, I'm proud of you, and I'm just so overjoyed that like you're killing it and you're happy and you've found your place and that you're just like crushing it. So
Thanks,
I
dude.
appreciate you, my man. Thank you for
so
having
much.
me.
Hell yeah, I love you, bro.
Love you too, my man.